How's it going, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Mentor Moments. My name is Brayton Wooters, one of your co-hosts, alongside Dr. Michael Keener. On Mentor Moments, we take the time to interview counseling professionals and personal mentors. As you know, this season we've been chatting a lot about leadership, technology, career development, and counseling as a profession. We hope you enjoy this episode of Mentor Moments and keep tuning in. Okay, so this episode of Mentor Moments is a little bit different. Typically we have like maybe one or two guests. Maybe we're talking about maybe one topic if it's just like Dr. Keener and I. This time it's a little bit different. We have three new guests with us, all talking about one specific topic. This is a topic that we've been chatting about quite a lot, I think this season, which is like professional engagement. And so a lot of this episode will be chatting a little bit about what that is and what Dr. Keener and our guests have been working on. So
I guess let's introduce our guests. We have Rachael, Jessica, and Karen with us. We'll let them sort of tell us a little bit about themselves, and then I'll get into this collaboration with the Missouri Rehab Association and with Maryville a little bit. So I don't know, Rachael, how about you go first?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I'm Rachael, as Dr. Keener has said, student at Maryville, and working together with my two other classmates on this really exciting professional engagement questionnaire. And really excited to talk to all of you about it today. So
thanks, Rachael. Jessica?
Hey, so I'm Jessica. I'm also rehab counseling student at Maryville. This has been a really exciting project for me because I really like the research and collecting data and analyzing stuff. So I'm really excited to see what we can do with this outside of the classroom too.
Great, thanks, Jessica. Karen, what do we need to know about you?
Hi, I'm Karen. I am a music therapy student at Maryville, and I bring a little bit of a different view just from my previous career experience shifting careers. So I've really enjoyed working on this project.
Awesome. Again, I don't know, maybe this is a little bit of a fun story. So first day of class, way back in January-ish, Rachael and Karen got to class early. We're standing out in the hallway, and I kind of pulled them aside and said, I need your help. I need you to be super excited about we're doing something special in class. We're going to do some service learning. We're going to develop this skill. And so I really have to give Rachael and Karen props for, I didn't have to ask them to be excited because they're naturally excited about learning, but it was very helpful that when I kind of said it in class, they were the first to yell and scream and yeah, let's do this. So I thank them for that. To give our listeners a little bit more of a background, again, as Brayton mentioned, we've been talking about professional engagement. As our listeners know, our podcast is collaboration with the Missouri Rehab Association. And as a board, we've been thinking a lot about what the board can do to give back to its members. Sometimes I feel like as a professional organization, we're always asking people to give us money to join, right? And come be a part of us. And so what are we giving back? And so in my mind, I started thinking about how can we start increasing people just to participate. And so then this idea of professional engagement sort of just emerged from that. And then our board said, yeah, let's try to do something with your class. And so again, I'm a teaching assessment this semester. So it's a little bit of a service learning where MRA had this goal of developing something that we can use with its members. And then the class embraced that. And we're going to tell that story of how we created a questionnaire called the PEQ, because that's like everybody needs an acronym. Maybe we should call it the PEQ 28, right? There's 28 questions, or the PEQ 20. Brayton, what do you think about that? I can see you're excited about that name.
So excited. I love numbers, right?
Yes.
Just put more numbers on the back.
There you go. Right. So anyways, I got, as my students know, sometimes I get distracted pretty easy. So I guess I'm just going to throw out the first question. Why do we think, or why is professional engagement important?
I think it's important that we engage with our profession to develop ourselves, to develop our professional capacity, to make sure that we are balanced across all aspects of our life, because life is not just where you work or your career, and to be able to plug in a meaningful way with other people.
I love that. Who else wants to add to that? I see some head nods, but it's a podcast. Nobody can hear the head nods, so.
Yeah, I was thinking having good professional engagement is really important because it helps decrease burnout. So like if you know that you're engaged and you're fulfilled in your career, you're a lot less likely to have that, oh, I have to go to work every day.
And nobody wants the case of the Mondays, right? Or whatever the
Right.
Sundays or whatever we call that, right? That anxiety we start feeling at the end of the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on top of both of those things, just like I feel like professional engagement, if you're engaged in your profession, then you're doing the best that you can, or you're always striving to do the best that you can as a provider or whatever role that you might have in your profession. So I think it's just a really interesting thing to just kind of keep awareness of throughout your professional career.
Yeah, I love those answers. And I know for me, and Brayden, love to hear your thoughts. Like, to me, this is different than employee engagement, where you're maybe connected to your employer. And to me, this is really like you're really being autonomous when you're doing this, because nobody is, it's not because you're doing it for a CEU requirement or you're doing something for your work. This is more altruistic. And again, to me, it's a different level. And so that's one of the things we wanted to really distinguish this assessment or this questionnaire from like employee engagement to the profession, and how does that help us grow?
For those listeners that we have that maybe this is the first time they've ever even thought about professional engagement, how would we go about defining what maybe that looks like, what that sounds like? How did we go about defining what professional engagement is?
We argued about it in class a lot. I think we all came at it with different ideas as far as defining things. It's really easy to have your own opinions, but to try to make them into cohesive thoughts with 7 other people, it's challenging.
But that was one of the
Yeah.
fun parts, right? Doing some wordsmithing, right? Kind of battling it out a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. There were some strong opinions.
So in class, the definition that we all, like, after all the wordsmithing and the arguing and everybody finally agreed on what we said, we came up with the definition of professional engagement refers to the level of involvement, commitment, and active participation that individuals exhibit in their professional activities, careers, or fields of expertise. It encompasses a genuine interest and enthusiasm for one's work, as well as dedication to ongoing learning, adaptability, improvement, and excellence in performance. Professional engagement goes beyond the routine tasks associated with a job and involves a proactive and positive approach to professional development, collaboration with colleagues, and contributing to the broader goals of the field while maintaining a healthy life.
I guess, Brayden, I want to put you on the spot now, because the 4 of us, we've sort of been living with this for 13 or 14 weeks. And this is, your first time sort of hearing it, reading it. And how does it resonate with you?
Yeah, so I would say that out of that whole definition, I for me personally, the term that speaks the loudest to me is this idea of commitment. Therapy, or just this field that we're all in, but especially that role of a counselor is really, really hard. I see burnout so much. I see not clients, I see other clinicians and practitioners that will, just feel burnt out, think that maybe they don't want to be a therapist anymore, wonder why they went through grad school the whole time just to be burnt out after 3 or 4 years. And so I'm not quite there. I can't say that that's something that I'm experiencing, but I'm seeing it in my peers and my colleagues that I work with. And so whenever I heard commitment, it kind of lit up something for me. And yeah, so I think that that's kind of where my brain's at. I don't know if that's resonating with anyone else.
So that definition could maybe be a little wordy for some people. So we did kind of chunk it up and determine the 7 C's of professional engagement. To clarify what those are, commitment to excellence, continuous education, connection, collaboration, continuity, changeability, and creativity could all be characteristics of professional engagement, and could be part of the reason why we were wordsmithing and maybe writing some, I don't want to say arguing about the definition, but there's a lot that can go into what professional engagement is. And so we landed on these 7 C's as being kind of key players in what that looks like or what that means.
So like as you all were like working on these C's, were there any of these C's that maybe you were surprised by? Maybe at the beginning you thought, oh, that wouldn't be professional engagement, but then you're like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. Or were all these fairly like intuitive?
I think continuity was probably the most surprising for me, because when I think about professional things, career, I don't think of necessarily initially about your whole life, like holistically, are you living well balanced? I think it's something that we let go of often in the name of furthering ourselves or rising up in the ranks or doing better in your career. Like, we let go of some of those things, but in order to stay engaged and to stay in a career long term, you have to prioritize living in a well-balanced way.
I think one that kind of stood out to me a little bit was the changeability, which we defined as the willingness and ability to adapt as the field develops. So I feel like that's one that like not a lot of people think of like putting a name to, I guess. Like for me, I'm thinking, oh, well, yeah, as the field develops, we just go with it. But not everyone would view that the same way as I do.
Yeah, I would agree with Jessica of like, I think I wasn't necessarily surprised by the 7 C's that we came up with, but I think they could have so many different meanings for each individual or the profession that you're in. So it was really interesting to have like the conversation back and forth, because me and Jessica are rehabilitation students and Karen is a music therapy student. So though we are in the professions of helping or serving others through mental health, but there are even just slight differences in what that means.
To me, even though we had, as we're saying, the wordsmithing sessions and some healthy debate and whatnot, unique thing, ironic thing, we love the play on words 7 C's. And so then obviously we had to come up with C words, but we also had 7 students in class. So it helped that then each student sort of adopted a domain as well, if you will, and sort of worked on it that way. I think we also, in some, and help me remember if I'm misremembering, we took the definition and sort of said, okay, what are some C words that sort of fit with the definition, right? And so versus coming up with those 2 things separately and trying to merge that way. But again, I think, again, Brayton, when you were talking about commitment, obviously that is one of our 7 C's as well. And again, I think you see some overlap with changeability when Jessica was talking, it's our ability to sort of predict or adapt well with that future. And so again, I think you can see we need a sort of a commitment to do that, continuous learning. So again, I think if we think of like a Venn diagram, there's partly these are somewhat separate, but partly together. And if any stats geeks are out there, we can talk about, is there actually 7 different domains, or is it one unidimensional construct that we're trying to measure?
Unidimensional. I'm sorry, you said unity.
So one is, let me say it maybe better and not mumble so much. So is professional engagement 7 distinct things, these 7 C's, or is it really one thing and then there's slight variations? Right now, again, from the nerd of us, it's really one thing with slight variations. We're not really finding that it's 7 distinct things. I think one of the things we want to do is not make this like a diagnosis, if you will. Like you don't necessarily need to have high levels of every one of these things to be engaged. Some of us, we talk about connection, and we were talking the other day that you might be the only counselor in your office, so maybe you have less connection for whatever reason. So it's not necessarily a bad thing if you don't have connection to sort of coworkers or whatnot. So again, it's more of a resource tool versus something that says this is true for everyone, or there's a good score or a bad score in your professional engagement.
I could see this being really helpful for those that like just are feeling like they're not engaged, and then they can just kind of read off that list and be like, oh, I didn't think that maybe I am missing out on these pieces. Well, I understand that we created like a questionnaire, right? We created 20 questions, something like that. How did we create those questions? Was that difficult? Are there some examples of questions that are in this assessment that our listeners would like to hear?
I'm sure they would love to hear some questions, right? We will also upload a link to this when we post the podcast. So if anybody wants to look at it, we will happily let them take a look. I guess just to give a quick overview, then I'll let Rachel, Jessica, and Karen kind of talk about their domain and some of the questions they created. As a class assignment, we said, let's come up with 5 to 7 or 8 questions. And then as a class, we narrowed it down to 4 for each domain. So that's how we got to 28 questions. I think as we continue to do some reliability testing, we may even make it shorter. After Rachel, Jessica, and Karen talk about their questions, I can talk about one question that we really probably want to throw out, because you can rate it either way. It doesn't mean that you're either engaged or not engaged. So let's get off talking about reliability, although that's very exciting, and let Jessica, you want to go first this time and talk about some of your questions?
Yeah. So my domain was creativity, which was being able to create new and innovative ways to advance the field and individual professional development. So some of my questions were, I guess they're not really questions, they're more of statements that people rank from strongly disagree to strongly agree. But I use skills creatively to solve problems. I seek new ways to solve problems. I learn from my mistakes, and I have excitement for everyday tasks. So when I was coming up with mine, I searched a bunch of like creativity scales that like already existed, and then just kind of looked at how they were wording theirs and came up with some stuff. I know when I originally posted my questions, it was one of those big conversations where, everyone had a lot to say about it. Which, I mean, is the whole point of the project, is to work together to come up with things. But I remember spending a lot of time wordsmithing my questions, trying to make sure that they came out making sense to people, but also not all sounding the same. I think that was my biggest struggle.
I think we feel pretty good about your questions. So I think you've done a good job. So Karen, how about you next?
Sure. My domain was commitment to excellence, which is, we put in parentheses as a way of being, instead of just leaving it at commitment to excellence. You can interpret it different ways. So we just wanted to put that caveat in there. But it's defined as committing to being the best professional while following ethical standards and best practices. This was tough to come up with questions for, I can't lie. I really wanted to have at least one question in there that conveyed, or that had the person taking the questionnaire decide or think about whether or not they considered what they were currently doing for work to be part of their career or just a job. So, for example, I know some other music therapy students who are working in fast food right now, or Starbucks, or things like that, and they consider those things jobs and not part of their career. That was probably one of the toughest questions to develop, just because it's hard to wordsmith it. So what I came up with was, I view my profession as only a means to earn a paycheck. And even that question can still be viewed several different ways. I think it's not perfect, but I don't know if we have a better way to get at that question. Let's see, what else did I ask? Oh, ethical practices. So unethical practices are important to challenge. And then I don't remember what my other questions were. I can't lie.
Well, you've even got me thinking about, because I've got some friends that who are very deep in their profession, but they end up on projects that they might feel like are unethical. For instance, maybe like advertising for something that they don't agree with. Maybe they work in marketing and they have to like create ads for like maybe a political thing that they don't agree with or something like that. And I could see how creating questionnaire bullets in that realm would be difficult.
Yeah, it's hard because almost everybody you ask is going to say, yeah, ethics are important. Of course it's important. Of course we want to call things out when it's not right. But the reality is that sometimes if we're in a position where that is part of what we're doing professionally, it's a lot more difficult to call those things out. So there's some lines there, I think, that are interesting.
And the other two questions that Karen developed, I have enthusiasm for my profession, and there is always room to improve my practice.
So my domain was continuous learning, which I was really excited about because I consider myself somebody who will be probably a forever student. So this is kind of a passion C, if you will, for me. So we define continuous learning as seeking opportunities for development as a professional. And we were kind of brainstorming examples of what that means too, and not just for continuous learning, but for all of the 7 Cs. So that could look like continuing education, certification, reading research related to your field, or even like attending conferences and things like that, just to continue learning in your field. So I don't know if you've discussed it on this podcast or not, but I actually used AI to assist me in developing these questions that I wrote. So some of them were kind of repetitive, but I did kind of wordsmith them to be different from each other. So mine were, I believe ongoing education is essential for career growth and development, which I personally believe because I'm here in my master's program. So that one was really high for me. Additionally, actively seeking out opportunities to enhance my professional skills. My current role allows for meaningful professional development, which is actually curious because that kind of ties back to what Karen was saying about people who are in jobs rather than their long-term careers. So maybe that could, I guess this is where that discussion of it being what did you call it, Dr. Keener?
Unidimensional, one dimension or multiple dimensions.
Yes. Yeah, so it goes, I think many of these questions could be applied to many different of the different Cs. Last question was, I do or plan to pursue additional continuing education to further my professional growth. So I think it was kind of straightforward for my C necessarily, just based on what continuous learning means to me, but that also kind of applies to just becoming a therapist. Most of the time you need an extended or advanced degree as well. So it'd be really curious to see how those questions apply to other professionals in different fields. I'm very curious to continue.
Well, Rachel, I think you brought up a good point. You know, when we started creating this, I think we thought this would be specific for sort of counselors, other helping professions, music therapists, speech language pathologists, and then sort of looking at it once we created it, we do think it potentially has a larger, I don't know, appeal is the word, but it's more than just helping professions that I think could benefit from this. And again, I think those are some of our next steps after the semester, to really start looking at it in multiple professions to see how well it captures people's feelings.
So I guess my question would be, what is next? How will we plan to use this in the future? Where do we see this being applied? Have we used it already?
Let me address how we've used it, and then maybe I'll let Rachel, Jessica, and Karen talk about future applications. So and maybe this is a little bit about the development. You know, like I said, we had 47 questions originally. And so we gave it out to not only the students in class, we gave it out to other students in our program. I had my wife take it as well, just to kind of, you know, a few other sort of professionals. And then they gave us feedback as well as our own feedback and sort of, okay, how can we word it? We do have some negatively worded ones just to make sure that people don't just answer 5 for everything. And so we can kind of assess that. So based on just feedback, we narrowed it down to 28. We have given it out to close to 50 people. And so I'm sure, Brayton, you remember this from research class, that when we're looking at assessments, right, we need to establish reliability first, right, Brayton?
Took the words right out of my mouth. I was
Right.
gonna, yeah, reliability.
Yes, before we can establish, you know, what we're assessing, which hopefully it is professional engagement. So we crunched all that data, and it's been very exciting. So we've done 3 types of reliability testing. We've done Cronbach's Alpha, we've done item analysis, and then we've also done some split half. And the Cronbach's Alpha and the split half, we have reliability coefficients of 0.7 to 0.811. So again, anything over 0.7 usually is pretty acceptable. Item analysis is slightly different. They do a correlation, and you eliminate questions that have a 0.3 or lower. And so from the initial sample, our questionnaire could be 20 items. However, they also say we should have 10 people take the assessment for every question. So if we only have 47, we really should have 280 people take it. So we want to get a bigger sample to really test reliability. But again, from the initial statistics that we've run, I think it's promising. With the, I don't know if it's the exception, but one thing we've talked about in class is question 23. And Brayton, you can tell me how you would answer this one, right?
Oh no.
Right. I take my work home after work hours. So you can agree or disagree. And again, you don't have to share your answer. In our minds, right, we want you to disagree with this, right? This is a continuity question with life-work balance. And this is the one that if we just take this one question out and we do some reliability analysis, it jumps off the chart. And so this is where I was trying to say early on, like, you can be engaged in your work and not take things home, and you can be engaged in your profession and still take things home. So although we're trying to assess this life-work balance, we're not sure if that really answers it. We had a group of, besides Karen and her classmate Chris take it, we've had other music therapists take it, and many of them are musicians outside of school, and that's, you know, their whole career there is sort of after hours, and so they might answer something different too. So again, just a little background on, you know, okay, on really the nuance it takes to really get a reliable and a valid instrument. So
well, and then you've even got me thinking about the nuance that it takes to even measure work, right? For some people, work looks like taking notes, where some people, oh, well, that doesn't count as work. That's just like easy stuff that I just kind of do on the side. So even defining what that means is difficult for each person.
yeah, we had one of our classmates yesterday too, Michelle, talk about the world of virtual work too. So if you're home, you don't have a workplace. So I'm always doing my work at home. And so again, if we ask again, if we want to keep it, we should reword that in some way, because it's sort of, it's throwing off our data a little bit. But again, stop getting nerdy on reliability, and let's ask our students, how do you see using this in the future?
I would see using it in the future as like a way to gauge for my own personal burnout. So my worst fear is to work a job that I hate. So I would want to like look at my overall score and break down different categories. So then like if I am starting to feel kind of bogged down by my work, then I can see like, okay, well, maybe I should find more creative things to do at work. Maybe I'm falling behind on my continuous learning, and kind of use the categories to see either where I can adjust my current job or maybe see it's time to go find a new one.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts to Jessica. I kind of split this question when I was reflecting on it in two, of like, personally, how would I use it? And then professionally, how could I use it? So personally, yes, using this tool to gauge my own professional engagement. I think it could be a great reflection tool to kind of open up, or again, using the word reflect, on like my goals, my work or career values, where my strengths lie, where I could maybe, improve a little bit. I think it could be a really helpful tool for that on an individual level. Professionally, if I were to be working with students who are getting ready for the professional world, kind of gauging, or somebody who's just entered the professional world as like an entry-level position, kind of gauging where they're at. I mean, I think it could be used with any professional. Even thinking about, my parents or something like that. They've been in the professional world for many, many years at this point. So, how does it differ from starting off your career to now being, advanced in your career? I think there's just a lot that can be discussed around this, and open up a lot of just conversations around what is important for my potential client in their career, and kind of going from there, and then helping them develop however they need professionally too.
I don't really have a ton to add to any of that. I will say part of our 50 people that we have given this to was my husband's marketing company. 11 of the 14 in his office filled it out. And I mean, I looked at their score, I scored theirs, and I mean, I felt like they were right around the same as where the music therapy students were. So I think that it's got a much broader reach than we initially planned for, which is awesome.
I guess the only thing I would add, we've talked about this could be done in a group, setting. Maybe each week you could talk about a different domain. I think when we give the final product back to MRA, it will be something where you can just self-score yourself. I sort of envision maybe doing little blog, breaking this up and doing blog posts on either 7 blog posts or grouping in some way. We kind of talked about every career phase, whether you're just entering or transitioning or retiring. And I guess one last thing, I think really, like Brayton and Jessica, you kind of mentioned this already, like Brayton, on face value, career for professional engagement. Yes, it's a vocational thing. And right, we know that's a major domain, but we were talking in class last night that this is also very much, as Jessica was saying, sort of a wellness or we want to kind of, although we're not really calling it a burnout thing, that, because work is such a major part of our lives, that this can help us stay healthy from a career perspective as well. So
because I haven't had the chance to administer this or try it out myself, have we noticed any limitations, challenges that have come just from having to administer it to other people or to ourselves?
So I feel like one of the things that is a little bit challenging is the scoring. If and when you do take it, Brayton, know in advance that you're scoring the total entire assessment, but then you can also score each individual of the 7 C's as well. So there's just a lot of numbers and finagling, making sure that you're, tracking the right score for the right C, and then adding and doing the math for all of those things. So because it's a paper assessment right now, or you're self-administering, it's not something done that's on a computer electronically. That is something that I think has been a little bit of a pain point for some people who've completed it. But hopefully at some point we'll have it digitally, so then a computer can calculate it all out for you or whoever.
Good to know that we're aware of my challenges with numbers.
I would say, just because it's in the preliminary stages, and again, I know I alluded to this early, this is not a nationally or internationally normed assessment. I think we haven't been collecting demographic data yet, but that's the next step to say, okay, is everybody who's completed it been between 20 and 52, or what's the gender identification, ethnicity, things like that. I also want to be culturally sensitive to make sure there's no language that would be misinterpreted, or even just, again, American work behaviors that wouldn't fit with other cultures. Obviously, I think, Rachel sort of alluded to, we would love to get it into computer software. And so then maybe with accessibility, maybe if somebody had a visual impairment, that it actually could be read to them, or somebody could blow it up for larger font. I don't know if we really checked it for reading level as well, just to make sure if it's just easily understood for, again, anybody I think we tried to do well not to have jargon in there. So I think, again, I would say strengths would be the versatility of it. And then the limitations could be just still new, but we're having fun with it.
Well, I remember when, Dr. Ken, I remember whenever you were presenting this idea to me before, and you were so excited. I remember you're like, here's this idea that we're going to try. We've never tried it before. Want to get your thoughts on it. And of course, I was just like, I think it was a Friday, so I was already burnt out. So I think I just said yes to everything. I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. Awesome. Granted, I mean, I understand that the students that we have here with us, they're in a podcast with their professor, but how has the experience been so far creating this?
I can turn off, or I can, if you need me to
Just log out of the Zoom real quick, come back.
So I thought it was a great idea. I like when learning has a real world application. So as opposed to being like, oh yeah, this is just for an assignment, you get a grade and then it's over. Like, this is something that can keep going. Like, real people are using it. Karen's husband took it to work. Like, there are people outside of us that know about this and are using it. And that, to me, makes it so much more cool to be a part of than just your run-of-the-mill paper homework assignment.
I tend to agree. I think it's way more interesting to do this for yourself and to develop an assessment yourself while learning about the concepts, and then being able to apply them immediately on something that you've made.
We also have to give Karen's husband a shout out. I know people in podcast land can't see this, but he created a graphic for us of the 7 C's, and another one that has a scale system. So if we want to do a quick check, we could sort of again, we were trying to do the play on the wellness wheel as well. So we have our wheel of the 7 C's. So we need to thank him for his love for Karen and for our assignment. So
yes, there's more edits coming.
We did have one other listener already, Brayden. I don't know if I told you, email me and said, I need a copy of this now. So, I mean, that's how big this is getting. And if for those are going to the Missouri Rehab Association conference in June, I'll be doing an ethics session based on the PEQ and giving everybody the assessment and kind of talking about it from an ethical perspective. And I need to give other shouts out to Rachel and Jessica, because I don't know if we said this before while recording, but we're gonna continue to work on this and do some research and publish the questionnaire, and so the entire world will be on Jimmy Fallon before we know it.
I don't want to give too much of like a curveball like to end it, but and this isn't even really included in the questions either, but it just feels right that if we were like to end the episode with a mentor moment, if any of the guests have like a mentor moment, so like a thought, a piece of advice, maybe professional engagement related, anything they've learned from this, any kind of like homework that you would assign to maybe a listener that's feeling kind of, I don't know, maybe not as engaged.
Well, that is one thing. I let them think a little bit, but that is one thing we didn't mention. What the students also did to parallel or to add benefit to the assessment we created 7 interventions so that after, either before or after, you can have some additional sort of thought. Like Karen did one that's an introduction to help us introduce what things do we think are professional development. Rachel helps us doing some goal attainment. I pair it up with strengths. So if you're somebody that does Clifton strengths or the VIA character strengths, you can do some. And then Jessica's really stayed true to her domain and talked about creativity.
Didn't even know that. Very cool. Any
I
other
think the
pieces?
students should give a mentor moments. I didn't want to rob it from them. So
I would say, and to tie it to our PEQ, I think connection is huge. Not only connection to your professors and reaching out for assistance or clarification or whatever you might need, but also connection with your peers. Karen and Jessica, just in class, constantly coming together, brainstorming, chatting. Yeah, I think connection is huge, and maintaining those relationships, I think, can be really important, not only for your personal well-being, but also for your professional well-being, and to stay engaged in your profession.
Yeah, I agree. You don't have to do it alone, and it's always good to have those conversations with other students in class, because it's that like, okay, you were struggling with this too? Okay, now I feel better. And then you can work through it together instead of feeling that isolation.
Mine is like a hard left, totally different. I would say, like, don't sell yourself short. If you think you deserve better than your current environment, it's okay to leave, and it's okay to shift, and it's okay to change.
Those are all
awesome.
great. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
I am just, again, honored to be, again, with all of you here tonight and talking about life, PEQ, all the good stuff. So again, thanks for all that you do.
Thank you for having us on your podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Mentor Moments. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere that you're listening to this podcast. Be sure to follow us at Mentor Moments on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And we will see you on the next episode of Mentor Moments.
Are you ready for a career that makes a difference in your community? Consider becoming a counselor with Missouri Vocational Rehabilitation.
Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor helps people who have disabilities find a career path that helps to use their strengths. When people have the supports that they need, it makes anything possible.
I am proud that I'm able to help people change their life and reach for their dream goals.
Discover the change you can make. Visit mvr.mo.gov to get started.